Hello and welcome to the podcast. Today we are talking to Director Calum Gillhespy with regards to the new Labour government's house building plans and how that might impact on planning and development and opportunities and threats for farmers and landowners. Welcome, Calum.
Hi there.
Lovely to have you on the podcast.
Thank you.
So the new government have big ambitions, don't they, for building lots of new houses.
They do.
I believe they're looking to build 1.5 million homes in this parliament. How does that compare with what's been built already?
It's going to be a challenge, I think, is the fair answer. If you look at the latest statistics, in 2022 we built just over 200,000 homes.
Right.
And last year it was just under 200,000 homes. So if you want to get to the 300,000 houses over the 5-year term, the last time that we achieved that as a country was 1977.
Okay, yeah, so it's going to be a massive challenge.
Especially when you factor in the fact they're not going to get to 300,000 this year. So you're going to have to roll some of those numbers on. And I think if you look at saying you're going to have to build 350,000 houses a year at the end of the parliament, since the Second World War, we haven't achieved that for 10 years.
Right.
So I think in 9 years since the Second World War, we've achieved that target.
Okay.
So it's a big ask.
And so what have been the blockers then? Why? Because every government, it feels like, talks about we need to build new homes, we need to build new homes. Why is it not happening?
I think there's a number of reasons. Planning has become technically more challenging. So the bar has increased, so there's a lot of work that has to be done to get planning through.
Okay.
I think in recent years, local authorities have probably had their planning teams cut because it's not really a front of house service. The general public don't notice the fact that you don't have half your planners.
Yeah.
They do notice if you don't have half the bin men, your bins aren't collected.
Absolutely,
So
yeah.
I think there's been a bit of lack of resource within the local authorities. Their workload going up because they've had to do more to assess the sites. And then once planning has actually been granted, it still actually takes years for a start to actually happen on site, because once you've got planning, you've got conditions to discharge, you've got infrastructure to put into sites, and getting just power to sites can be a challenge.
Okay.
So there's no one thing that is causing a delay, which makes the government's ambition even more ambitious,
Right.
because they've got to overcome a number of challenges.
Okay. So it's not going to be straightforward for them.
It's not going to be straightforward, but I think if there's a will, and they've obviously got a significant majority, so hopefully they can push through the legislation that they need, and then it's up to the local authorities then to grasp the nettle and do their bit.
Okay. So how are they going to achieve this then? So if you're sitting there, if you're in number 10, how are they going to approach it? What have they said?
So there's a number of key things that have issued announcements on recently. The first is that the local planning framework is set by a national set of guidance, and the National Planning Policy Framework is the document that Westminster issues, that then it dictates how everything else has to come forward. So they've consulted on changes to that document in order to do a number of key things. One is to re-establish housing targets, which the last government scrapped. And the other then is to look at how they calculate the allocation of houses to each local authority area.
Right.
And the previous methodology was heavily criticised because it tended to put a lot of housing in the south and not a lot of housing in the north. So the new method that they're consulting on is based more around the stock that exists within each region. And then where there are areas of acute affordability, there's then an additional amount of housing that's needed to try and overcome that. So they're consulting on a multiplier of average earnings against average house price.
Okay.
And then where there's a significant differential, then those local authority areas will have to deliver more housing to address that affordability issue.
Okay.
So that's one of the things that they've proposed. The other is that they're looking at a task force to spearhead new towns being built. So the last government had a programme of garden villages, which were new settlements of over 5,000 houses.
Okay.
they're talking now about doing garden towns, which is 10,000 houses plus.
Okay.
So that is, as I understand it, though, in addition to the 1.5 million houses.
In addition to.
So the 1.5 million houses they want to see delivered through local plans, and then the garden city concept sits outside that. So this would be in addition to those. One of the reasons I suspect they've put this outside the 1.5 million is that these things take an awfully long time to come forward, and therefore, if they're going to happen quickly, I suspect the government will have to put some money behind, investing in infrastructure and helping to open all of that up, because just the funding of these things, if it's all done privately, is a real challenge.
Yeah, because they're talking about the need to put in schools, doctors, kind of resources within so that they can actually function as a town.
Yeah, basically, you need all the facilities that you would have in the town. Ideally, they're on day one, because you don't want to build hundreds of houses and then have no school for 10 miles, no shops. So all of that infrastructure takes a huge amount of money. It doesn't give the house builders a return.
No.
So that's where government funding of some sort would probably help with that.
Okay.
So yeah, so there's a number of concepts that they put out there.
Yeah.
All of which will take quite a bit of effort to make happen. But if it's done properly and people engage with it, then it could start to deliver those numbers.
Okay.
So we should wait and see.
All right. So I'm a farmer and I'm a landowner. Why do I care about this? What opportunity is there in these new proposals, these government ambitions for me?
So I guess, why should you care? Brass tacks is that it's going to add significant value to your land if you can get development on it. So I guess that's the driver for most people looking at development. So the opportunities that are there are to look at, first of all, where the local plan is at the moment. As a region in the north of England, we've got significant areas that are under sort of unitary authorities or mayoral districts now, and a lot of those have got local plans that are in the process of being made. So we've got Westmoreland and Furness, North Yorkshire, South Tyneside. These are significant areas. So the first opportunity there is to make representations to the local plan, get your land allocated, and then get it taken forward. And
there's a few call for sites that have been open or are opening at this moment in time, isn't there? So there is.
Yeah, so as we speak today, Westmoreland and Furness are doing a call for sites until the end of September.
Yes.
And North Yorkshire's has just closed. I also understand that Durham and Northumberland are also going to be looking at local plan reviews possibly next year.
Right.
So when you add all of those together, that's a real significant part of the region.
Okay.
But if you're not in the process of having the plan updated, there are still ways in which that land might come forward.
Okay.
So a lot of local plans will have what we call the windfall policy that will allow for, sort of, if you like, unforeseen development to be brought forward. And those might be interpreted in a more generous way, perhaps, so that development that might not have previously been something that the local authority would have supported under that policy, with a bit of encouragement from Westminster, they might actually take a slightly different view on how they interpret those policies.
Okay.
So those could still come forward.
So what you're saying is that potentially if you've previously put forward a site and it's been turned down, there might be there's an opportunity to bring it forward again under the new, with the new priorities.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think where we're talking about the garden towns, I think the starting point will be those that have previously been submitted unsuccessfully to the previous rounds that the government's had. But exactly the same principle applies, yes, to sites that have been refused. The benefit of you getting a refusal is that you've been told why it was refused.
Yeah.
So you can address those issues and then represent the site back to the council and hopefully have a much better chance of getting through.
Okay.
So every cloud's got a silver lining.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so there's plenty of opportunity for those who are thinking, and they obviously need to be in the right areas and things. And we are talking large scale development here, aren't we? What about smaller scale development? Will there be, will this potentially open up the opportunity for farmers who are looking at small-scale development. They've confirmed that the permitted development rights, the changes that were brought in prior to the election, that's not going to change. That's going to continue to be the case. But is there any, on a smaller scale, does this open any opportunities for landowners at all?
So one of the high-profile announcements that Keir Starmer made was around grey belt.
Yes.
And again, we've got big areas of land that are covered by the green belt, where land is effectively brown field, but within the green belt. So it's previously developed in some form. And Keir Starmer, I think, was talking about disused car parks, petrol filling stations, wasteland that was of no meaningful value, and land that doesn't serve a genuine green belt function. So it's not contributing towards preventing the coalescence of settlements, because that's effectively what green belt is there for. Then they would look positively at that coming forward. There are a number of golden rules that they've said that they're going to have in relation to grey belt land.
Right.
One of which is that they've got to deliver 50% affordable housing. Second is that they've got to contribute meaningfully to improvements to local services and infrastructure. And they've also got to create what's genuinely good quality green space within the development.
Okay.
So for smaller scale developments, there might well be opportunities to bring forward land as grey belt. If you think about a petrol filling station, you don't get that many houses on a petrol filling station.
True.
So I think it'll be interesting to see what the grey belt concept looks like and whether that does present opportunities. Because if you look at the green belt around Morpeth, for instance, I think from memory it's actually larger than the green belt around London in terms of its acreage.
Yeah.
So there's vast tracts of that green belt that serve no purpose in preventing Morpeth merging with any other settlements. So might there be larger scale opportunities within that green belt that you could bring forward on a bigger scale? And I'd have thought that sensibly there ought to be if the government wants to encourage these sorts of housing numbers.
Yeah.
Because most of that land serves no meaningful green belt purpose akin to Morpeth. But we're going to have to see how all of this looks. There's no definition at the moment of grey belt.
No.
So it's definitely a space to watch though, because people who've been in the green belt have been really restricted in terms of what they can do. Tourism opportunities, for instance, you can't necessarily bring forward in the green belt. So I think it opens up a plethora of opportunities for housing, yes, but also employment opportunities, tourism-related opportunities, other leisure opportunities that we wouldn't have had.
Okay. Well, that's good news all round.
It is fantastic.
One of the things that landowners and farmers might be a bit concerned about is the talk about increased compulsory purchase order powers, and will they be used to acquire land at low values? Is this just scaremongering, or how do you think they would plan to use these powers? Just might be something that people are thinking about at the moment.
Yeah, there's definitely been talk of that. And I think probably with this government, I think they probably are going to bring that forward in some fashion. I think to my mind, it's probably unlikely that they're going to use it widely to acquire land for development.
Okay.
And I think if you've already got on board with a house builder and you're looking to promote the site already, I think there's a question of why would the government want to intervene with that process, probably slow it down.
Okay.
As a consequence of using compulsory purchase powers. I think where you've got maybe 5 landowners that you need to make a scheme viable and 4 of them have signed up and the 5th hasn't, I think they're probably at risk of being compulsorily acquired. Or if we need infrastructure to get into the site, so if you need a new road and things, rather than being held to ransom and you could be in negotiation over a ransom strip for years, you can see that that is a good use of compulsory purchase powers to facilitate that wider development.
Okay.
I think there's then a slightly different question as to should landowners be profiting from the uplift in value, and I don't see compulsory purchase powers being used as a means of avoiding landowners making a profit.
Right.
I think what they'll find is that they're probably going to get taxed more heavily on the profit that they make.
Okay.
So hopefully those powers will be brought forward in a way that facilitates development, but this unlocks it in a way that isn't stealing it, if you like. So I think my advice would be, yes, there is a risk, but if you want to take it forward, get on board, show that you're actually making meaningful steps towards development, and then I think you'll probably head off that risk if it comes to pass.
So it's a tool in the toolbox, not a way of sweepingly acquiring land from landowners for
Hopefully,
less than market value.
Let's wait and see.
Okay. Right. So then I suppose kind of final question from me. So I'm a landowner thinking about, you've made this sound very exciting. There's a clear opportunity. I've got a bit of land. I'd like to do something about it. What do I do? What are my next steps?
So there are probably three key ways in which landowners can take land forward. They can do that themselves with some funders.
Okay.
So they would need to engage a professional team to do all the technical work that's needed to promote that land and be prepared to walk away from that investment if it's unsuccessful.
Okay.
So some landowners are keen to do that because you do get a much better return at the end of the day if you're successful. But it takes people into an area of risk that a lot of landowners aren't comfortable with.
Okay.
So you're then looking at trying to find a development partner who will come on board with you. And we would recommend that you try and find a promoter. So a promoter isn't somebody who will ultimately build houses on the site, but they will get the planning, and for a share of the land value that they achieve as a result of getting planning, they then get their fee. So they would then go to the market, find a buyer for the site, and the benefit of a promotion agreement is that the promoter gets a share of the ultimate sale price. So your interests are very closely aligned as a landowner with the promoter. The other option is to use an option agreement, and that's where you do a deal with somebody who's going to build the houses, and they will then go through the process of getting the planning. Ultimately, at the end of the day, that buyer makes more profit the cheaper they buy the land from you. So you always end up in an adversarial negotiation at the end of that process. But a lot of landowners like the comfort that they've actually got the person who's going to build on the site as the party that they've done a deal with. And it just comes down to perception of risk that the landowners make that call. So they can do it themselves and take all the risk and get a significant part of the uplift. They go with a house builder because they think they've got that covered and they're definitely going to get houses built there. But as I say, our recommendation would be try and find a promoter to take it on board for you if you can.
Okay, so it's all down to appetite for risk. High risk, high reward, low risk, still, a good return, but...
Still a very good return, yeah. You've just got to be prepared that once you've got planning, that you've probably got a 12-month negotiation over the price at the end of it.
Okay.
That's not necessarily a bad thing because you've got the planning consent and you're arguing over, extra millions of pounds, hopefully.
Yeah.
The thing you need to do is make sure, obviously, you're taking proper professional advice, from an agent who can represent you in those negotiations, from your accountant so that your tax planning's right, and from a solicitor who's familiar with that sort of deal so that it's properly structured. Because at the end of the day, it's worth a huge amount of money to you as a landowner. You need to make sure you get every facet of it right.
Well, that's certainly been a really interesting walk through the opportunities, challenges and risks. I certainly feel reassured on the compulsory purchase orders, and we'll see kind of how that flies. But I think it's clear that there's a real opportunity for landowners at the moment. And if they're interested, they need to just get in touch, get some professional advice, and then see where it takes them.
Yep, absolutely. Okay. Yeah, there's going to be a fantastic opportunity for people.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for joining us. Okay. And thank you for listening. To hear more on the new Labour government's policies and how they're going to impact agriculture, farming and landowners, do continue watching. Thank you very much.